at problem number 2. Problem number 2 is just a little bit different than the first one we did. This time we're going to cross a short plant with a heterozygous tall plant. If you'll notice, we're not given quite as much information, but we do have enough information about our parents in order to solve this Punnett square. To start with, let's figure out our genotype for our short parent plant. We're told it's short. We're told the other one is heterozygous tall. That tells us this tall is the dominant characteristic. If we go back and we remember what we've learned about the recessive always has to be homozygous. So our short parent has to be 2 little t's. Homozygous recessive. It is crossed with our heterozygous parent, and again, as it was the last time, that's a big T and a little t. Homozygous recessive, heterozygous. Short is recessive, heterozygous is tall, exhibiting the dominant trait. Okay, let's make our cross. Where do we put our parents? We put our parents on the sides and the top of our Punnett square. Doesn't matter which position, we put them on the side and the top. So let's start with our recessive parent, 2 little t's. Here's our heterozygous parent, big T, little t. Our first cross is going to result in a heterozygous offspring. Our second cross also has the possibility of being a heterozygous offspring. Our third cross, we have recessive, which has to be homozygous, and our last cross is also homozygous recessive. So, in this cross, we have a little bit different results than we had the last time. We're going to need to show the genotypes of our offspring in our genotypic ratio. So, our genotypic ratio, okay, how many of these are going to look the same? Well, you can clearly see that we have these 2 offspring that are heterozygous. So we can write this as a ratio, big T, little t. How many of them are different from those 2? Well, we clearly have these 2 recessives that are different. So we would put 2 would be recessive. The other thing I need to remind you of, if we have it written as a ratio, we could also write it as a percent. Obviously, it's a pretty easy percent to figure out. 50% of them are heterozygous, 50% of them are recessive. So let's put that down just to remind us that we could see it both ways. You may see problems where you're asked to go from percent back up to your parent. You may see problems where you're needing to put the ratio. Either way works perfectly fine. From this information, we can now figure out what our phenotypic ratio would be. Please remember, we were told our tall, heterozygous, that one's our dominant characteristic. So any offspring with a big T is going to look tall. Phenotype, physical characteristic. If you notice, we have 2 offspring which are going to exhibit the tall phenotype. So 2 will be tall. We have 2 offspring here who do not show a dominant genotype. There is no dominant allele present in either of those 2 offspring. So they will be recessive. So they will be, based on our problem, short. Again, we could just as easily say 50% tall and 50% short. Either way works. This is a cross between a homozygous recessive crossed with a heterozygous.